Welkom by nog 'n episode van Kallie maak kennis met. Ek is Kallie en soos op die vorige episodes praat ons nou verkiesingssake. 29 Mei is daar 'n verkiesing. Ons vra ons lede om te gaan stem, maar uit die aard van die saak is julle slim genoeg om self te besluit vir wie om te stem. En daarom is hierdie programme waar ons met verskillende politieke leiers praat, om hulle self die geleentheid te gee om julle in te lig, sodat julle kan self besluit. Nou vandag het ek 'n Engelssprekende persoon hier by my, en al hoekom ek dit noem is, hy het my nou baie gerus gestel, net voor hierdie onderhoud begin het. Ek het groot kalmte uitgesê, ek kan in Afrikaans vir hom vra. So julle word gespaar van my Engels, maar julle word bederf met die goeie Engels van Phil Craig. Nou Phil Craig is die leier van die Referendum Party. Dis 'n nuwe party, maar interessante party. Phil, welcome to AfriForum.
Thank you, Kallie. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and let's just get right into it. Why would you say AfriForum members should vote for the Referendum Party?
Well, I think the Referendum Party, first of all, the Referendum Party is a party of activists and not politicians. It's not a party that's wanting to take political power. It's a party that's wanting to change a broken system. And as we've said, if you're going to vote like you've always voted, you're going to get what you've always got. And we've got this system where we've got a majoritarian democracy, not a constitutional democracy. It's broken, it isn't going to be fixed, and that isn't a future for minorities in South Africa. We have to create our own future. It's very much what your organisation's about, and it's very much about what our organisation is about. Now, we're primarily based in the Western Cape, and therefore we're fighting for Western Cape independence, because that's the form of self-determination that is going to give the Western Cape people control of their own destiny. But as you know, we're very supportive of Afrikaner self-determination, Zulu self-determination, and basically any group that wants to take responsibility for themselves and get away from this unitary state where a government that we don't like, we didn't elect, in fact we despise, let's be honest, we need to get away from that and to create a different future for ourselves. So what's the Referendum Party fighting for in the Western Cape? We're fighting for a referendum on Cape independence so that the Western Cape people can take control of their own destiny, at least start off by making that key decision. Do they want to remain a part of South Africa, given that for 30 years the majority have never once voted for the ANC, and they've been stuck with this government that they don't want, didn't vote in and can't vote out? So that's our primary position in the Western Cape. We recognise that the DA have done a decent job, so we're not trying to remove the DA from power in the Western Cape. In fact, we've said we'll support them in government, because we have to make sure the ANC stay out of the Western Cape too. But we're absolutely determined to force them to call the referendum on Cape independence that allow those Western Cape people to take control of economic policy, policing, borders, and everything else that was necessary to create a better future. On a national stage, because we're standing on all three ballots, Western Cape Provincial, Western Cape Regional and National, then nationally, I guess we're the vote for change. We're the vote that says this system just doesn't work. If you want self-determination, vote for us. And obviously we'll do two things. In the National Parliament, we're looking to really bring attention to the self-determination of peoples, which is our thing, and we're not going to take any prisoners. We haven't got anything else. We're a single issue party, so we're there to fight for the right of self-determination. We're not there to govern. We're there to turn the system on its head. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to table a change to the South African Constitution, which will allow citizens to instigate referendums. Going to use the New Zealand model, and I think that's very, very important for communities, very, very important for the Afrikaans community, who potentially then can have an Afrikaans referendum, because that's the point of this, is that any section of the electorate can call its own referendum if you can demonstrate that it has sufficient support. The government then is obliged to call that referendum, and it becomes a real agent for change. So the Referendum Party is for people who've just had enough of this system. It's a vote. Somebody said to me, look, you guys have given up hope, and I said, no, we're the exact opposite. We haven't given up hope. We are going to save our parts of this country, but we're going to do it by taking proactive action. We've had enough. We're not going to sit and wait for anybody to do anything. We're going to take control of our own destiny. We're going to go out there and we're going to create the future that we want, a first world future in Africa.
Okay, now let me just ask a follow-up question. If you look at AfriForum's membership base, the Western Cape is the second province in terms of membership numbers. Our biggest membership base is in Gauteng and then the Western Cape. So many of our members stay outside of the Western Cape. So what I'm hearing from you is that people staying in Pretoria or in the north, anywhere in the country would be able to vote on the national ballot for your party. And what would that help?
Yeah, so absolutely, and yes, we'd love for people to vote for us on the national ballot. Obviously, it's going to help us put political pressure onto the system. And I think the difference is, and I get it's a different proposition outside nationally. Primarily, we're driving Cape independence. I think Cape independence has huge value to people outside of the Western Cape, because what we're looking to create in the Western Cape is an ideological homeland for people who think like us, people who have broadly Western values, who want to live in the first world, and want to and I've often used the example, the Western Cape becomes almost like Israel for the Jews, if I can use that example. You don't have to go and live in Israel to benefit, if you're Jewish, to benefit from an Israeli state. You've got somebody who's your people, your ideological people, and they're going to have your best interests at heart. And I think it's the one place where in South Africa, current South Africa, we can create hard power. We can have a police force, we can have a military, we can have borders, and actually be in a situation to influence in a really significant way at a national level the circumstances in South Africa as what currently is. Obviously we want to break South Africa up, and I think that has huge benefit to people within the Afrikaans community who are vulnerable. We understand that.
Baie dankie Phil. Ek het net nou die vraag per ongeluk in Engels gevra, maar kom ek skakel sommer dadelik weer oor na Afrikaans toe. Die Referendum Party is 'n baie jong party, maar as ons jou vra wat is die party se suksesrekord, is daar iets wat jy vir ons kan sê?
No, absolutely. So we are a very, very young party. We're formed on the 9th of November, so we're just 6 months old. But actually, the Referendum Party is just one part of our story. And many people will know me from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, which is an organisation I co-founded in 2020. And the Referendum Party and the Cape Independence Advocacy Group are sister organisations that work very, very closely together. And the Referendum Party is a tactical move that came out of that. And what have we done as the Cape Independence Advocacy Group in this run-up to here? Well, we're the people really that's driven the whole debate, or moving the debate that existed, I should say, from Cape Independence into the mainstream. If you've seen the marches, that was us. If people have seen the polling, that's been us. Most of the articles that have appeared into the media around Cape Independence was us. The Western Cape Devolution Working Group, as you know, was a project that we started, and ultimately we pushed that as far as we could through political lobbying, and we put a lot of pressure onto the DA, and in fact we secured an agreement from the DA in 2021 before the local government elections that they would call a referendum on Cape Independence, or they call a referendum which included a question on Cape Independence. We also worked on that Western Cape People's Bill. That was a bill that we authored, that the Freedom Front Plus brought, but it was our project. And so ultimately we created a huge amount of pressure around Cape, and that's why it's such a political topic. But we then came to the sort of point where the DA had come so far, but not far enough, and ultimately they lacked the courage to go on. They weren't willing to get behind the Western Cape Peoples, but even though we worked with them for 8 months on that, they reneged on their agreement around the referendum and said no, they're not going to call a referendum on Cape Independence, and ultimately they were hard lines in the sand for us. We want self-determination, and the Western Cape People's Bill claimed the right of self-determination for the Western Cape, but it opened the door to communities way beyond that. It was a very critical piece of legislation. The DA were in support of that in the early days, and they just lost courage and then said no, they weren't going to support it. They brought the Provincial Powers Bill instead, which was just a sort of defensive measure and a watered down version. And when they reneged on the referendum promise and they refused to bring the Western Cape People's Bill, then we realised that, okay, what do we do next? We've got to go and get hard political power. We need people to vote for it. The DA have called Cape Independence supporters bluffs. They've said, look, you know what, we don't think you've got it in you to vote for Cape Independence because you're so scared of the ANC that you are that you're not willing to vote against the DA. And we've said, okay, well, you know what, we'll put up a political party, we'll promise to vote with the DA, which then allows DA voters, or previous DA voters, the comfort of saying, now go and vote for Cape Independence, because it won't let the ANC back in, and we'll vote with the DA to make sure the DA stay in power. But actually that then comes with a responsibility to Cape Independence supporters. The DA are not going to deliver a referendum on Cape Independence unless Cape Independence supporters vote for it. And that, so we've played this great role in getting us so far, but actually we got to the point now where the Referendum Party is and I've often described it in that story from the Bible as the second plague. The DA promised the referendum like the Pharaohs promised to Moses, and then when the 2021 elections were over, they went back on their word. We said, okay, well, the Referendum Party is the second plague. We're coming back, we're putting you under pressure again, because we are going to get a referendum on Cape Independence, as long as people vote for us.
Baie dankie. Nou, jy het net nou gesê, jy's nie 'n politikus nie, jy's 'n aktivis. Maar jy's ook 'n mens. Nie net 'n aktivis nie. Vertel ons bietjie meer van jouself.
Thanks, Kallie. I consider myself as somebody who's very ordinary, and I like that about myself. I don't want to be extraordinary, and I hope that if I've done one thing in my life, I've inspired people to just what ordinary people can achieve. I came to South Africa 20 years ago as a moderately successful businessman. I fell in love with a beautiful Afrikaans lady.
A boeremeisie.
'n boeremeisie. Ja. Ek het 2 mooi kinders gehad, and ek is very happily married. I fell in love with the woman, I fell in love with the country, and like a lot of people, I sat here in horror, and actually the enige church in Wellington was the turning point for me, and the Dominee Benny van Rensburg, stood up one Sunday and he said, listen, there's absolutely no point in coming to church on a Sunday and praying that God is going to save our country if you're going to go home on Monday and do nothing about it yourself. And I went home on Monday and I formed the Cape Independence Advocacy Group with some other people, and 4 years later, here we are. So a very ordinary guy who is fighting for a future for my children, who ironically, I'm as British as they come. My children are Afrikaans, speaking their Afrikaners. Effectively, I've become Afrikaans. I live in an Afrikaans community. So, and I'm fighting for a future. We could go to the UK. I don't want to go to, why do any of us want to go to the UK? We live in this magnificent part of the world. Let's save this.
Juffrou, baie dankie dat jy hier spesiaal van die Kaap af gevlieg het om ons te besoek hier, om hierdie onderhoud te doen met AfriForum TV. Ek weet nie of jy 'n paspoort moes gebruik het om oor die grens te kom van die Wes-Kaap nie, maar ek hoop is nie jou laaste besoek hier aan ons kantoor nie.
Baie dankie, Kallie, ek waardeer dit. En ons het nie nou 'n paspoort gebruik, maar as ons 'n reg kry, dan moet ons 'n paspoort gebruik later.
Goed, so daar hoor julle dit. As vol sy sin kry, dan moet julle 'n paspoort hê om die onafhanklike staat van die Wes-Kaap, of ek hoop het sal 'n republiek wees dan, vol? Nee. Goed, daar het julle nou gehoor wat die Referendum Party sê. Soos wat ek sê, AfriForum skryf nie aan ons lede voor vir wie hulle moet stem nie. Ons lede laat ook nie aan hulle voorskryf nie. Dis soos ook by die huis, my vrou laat nie toe dat ek aan haar voorskryf nie, en ons is dankbaar daarvoor. So besluit vir wie jy wil stem, luister ook na die onderhoude met ander politieke leiers, wat ook hier is by Kallie maak kennis met se programme, en sien julle op die 29ste Mei by die stembus. Mooi loop.